Okay, so we are back. Trying to find another timeline. This was it. Um, that's what it says. Um, and basically, I had to go in all possibilities, and there is a possibility that if I had stayed at this prefab instead of him, that he might survive or live longer. So I'm just gonna go through with that decision. His death would be unavoidable. By keeping him alive, I should be able to create a different timeline. Simply surviving wasn't enough. That meant I had to try all possible options. I had to reveal all the things I was arrogant or afraid of. For all I knew, I might have overlooked some minor yet important details, but first, I wanted to try something more impactful. Letting Hishimoto-san survive would have greatly affected the timeline. That already happened once with Mimiya-san's survival. It even changed the Guardians people received. I could still remember the last loop. I'd become the snake, out the wolves, and decided to live alongside those survivors, most importantly Rikeko. Those settlements had earned on unreasonably cruel conclusions. I could still remember the sadness and despair, but I couldn't really understand it. Why had I forgotten my fear of the unknown? Why had it been so easy for me to decide to move to Yasumizu and live alongside with Reikako? Was I that kind of person? I didn't know why, but it definitely seemed like I wasn't really myself back then. I felt like I became part of something greater, not just an individual. Years all snapped to place back and brought forth that tragic end. These feelings and guesses coming to my head left me without a clue as to where to go from here. A part of me did feel like fate or something divine existed and that I couldn't escape its controls no matter what. By my knowledge, discretion, perception, and intuition wanted to deny that line of thinking. There was no absolute fate. If there was something like that, it was either someone's elaborate plot or just a product of my imagination that seemed like it. I wasn't being a conspiracy theorist here, or analysis for that matter. However, I wanted to reject lines of thinking that stifled my ability to come up with ideas. If I could think creatively, I might be able to find gaps in these seemingly penetrable bars gelling me here.
おさいし君、どうかした？
No, nothing. But since I'm going to stay here every day from now on, I think you should at least have it for one
し
night.
かし、
I heard that from Fujiyoshi has a culture of giving guests a warm welcome. If I'm going to be part of it, I think I should do the same.
マレビト信仰確かにロケーション的にはしっくりくるけど、それってあの樋口さんから聞いたの？
Oh crap, that was the info Reikako-san had given me in the last loop. While I'd been treated nicely, they even gave me a place to
久
stay.
石君人がいいのね。
Huh? Nope, not at all.
ご好意はいただいたらどうです橋本さん？
じゃあ、いただこうかな。
All good. After parting ways with them, I went to Kori-san and had her help me get a shabby blanket, some newspaper, and a water bucket. There were only one bucket they could let me use, and it was in a pretty bad state, showing once again how dire Yasumizu's supply problem was. The newspapers weren't the daily news, but some old ones brought from Kami Fujiyoshi as material supplies. I spread them out on the floor and placed them on the blanket, and that was my sleeping spot ready. I also bought a portable toilet at the convenience store. Now, if nature called during the night, I wouldn't be faced in the difficult choice to either die or piss myself. After finishing up the preparations, I, just like last time, returned to the dining hall. I was given some shashar again and somehow ate it all.
平気そうね。お口にあったかし。
It's not bad, actually. That was a bit of a lie. I just came prepared for it because of my experience from last time. I still wasn't used to it enough to declare it good. Just what kind of booze would you go with this? Then, like last time, I went on fixed plates. Last time, I learned the symbols of the Umatsu and I got the snake. The Miguru Rama symbol, and even it wasn't too clear. The Nosato mansion had their own on the gates, so now I knew them all. This info could possibly lead to the truth, so I had to remember it all. Some time passed, and like last time, the students came back. We're back, huh? The bright yet tender Yasunaka Oropi. His tenderness was mostly forward his family, though it was a very human trait, which was a good thing. I felt bad for him for getting caught up in something like this. Whether he was an ally or an enemy in the feast greatly affect how it went. I didn't want him as an opponent. That was much as certain. The free-spirited, slightly immoral Chikomochi Kamoshida. He'd left quite an impression on me. As a wolf, he was a threatening individual who would do some horrible things with a straight face. But what would he be like this time? And then there was her. Haru. Last time she'd been brutally murdered, while the time before that she sided with the wolves. It wasn't much of a contributor to the feast. I considered her to be a troublemaker rather than anything else. But...
そうか。落ちてきたか。己、幾度かやり直しておるな。
はるちゃんは夜中寂しがって一人で抜け出したんだ。お泊まり学校。それで山道を抜けて。わからない。大人は安水の手前で見つけたって言ってたけど、みんな安水で何か見たんじゃないか。そのせいかわかんないけど、それでしばらくはるちゃんおかしくなっちゃって、みんな狼つきとか噂して。
She was the closest person to the mystery surrounding Yasumi Zoo. She'd lost her parents to the previous feast, disappeared once, and then started talking strangely.
偉大なる神を下ろすのは相応の儀礼にのっとるべきで、簡単に勝手に取りつかれるようなものではないと。
The village had insisted that this wasn't any sort of possession but a mental illness. However, the fact that it was treated using Umatsu's special ability to take in such a thing made it seem entirely possible that the trouble surrounding her was of divine origin, but there was something I didn't really understand. I didn't know how, but last time Rikako healed me of orconite poisoning. I knew it with my own body. With this ability was more than just a religious rite, but it had an actual physical effect that didn't necessarily mean that it would work on mental illnesses too. Honestly, there were too many things that didn't make sense here.
その汚れは私にも引き取れない。
I didn't know the rules. It kind of freaked me out, but for now, I had no choice but to set Rikako's issues aside. What matters now was Haru. She had parental issues and a strange relationship with her granddad. All in all, she was a delicate young girl going through a complicated time in her life. I didn't quite know how to deal with her. Playing around with her didn't work, and Casanova-type characters seemed to scare her. I tried not to do much and appear harmless. Maybe that would work.
おかえりあなたたち。こちら急遽安水に移り住むことになった夫妻さんよ。
Hello. I bowed with an empty expression on my face.
アンドロイドだ。
I had to do my best not to fall over at that. Why?
だってなんか人間じゃないみたい。おお、はるちゃんが僕より失礼だ。
I'm sorry, she watched a sci-fi movie recently. I'm human, just so you know.
どうも、牧島春です。
She wasn't as wary of me as last time. At least I still had no idea how to approach her.
どっかで会いました？
Huh? No, this is my first time here.
ですよね。
Does she have memories of my... No, the previous loop?
なんだこれ。香織さん、ごめんなさい。ちょっと手ぬぐいかなんかもらえます？
Something similar had happened last time too. It wasn't impossible that someone else had memories of the previous times. Particularly this girl, considering her head held traces of madness.
何？
Crap, I stared at her too long. I had to tuck it off. I should feel like you're familiar too. Ever been to
ないで
Kanto?
す。
I see, then this must be something special. What's wrong? You're all red.
いや、そんなことないよ。ほー。
Was she easier than I expected? Maybe android-like coolness was the way to go with her. Whatever that was. Orobi-san, I have completed the repairs on the plates. Whatever should I do with them? Cool manner of speech, robotic movements, playing with the people's impressions was a bad idea that I had.
じゃあこっちへ。さっきそんな喋り方だったかしら。
Acknowledge. Executing appropriate.
暗い必殺人間バナナ。
Eat this human banana. Mochi closed in on me, shouted some weird skill name, instantly undid my belt and brought my pants down. Blah!
すっげーパンツだ。
こら、近持くん。やっていいことと悪いことがあるでしょ。
いや、今を除いて仕掛けるときはなかったろ？
Well, if you look at this as a joke, this is definitely well timed. My android-like coolness, whatever that was, instantly became a gag. His skills left me so dumbfounded that I just froze in place with my pants down, effectively giving a treat for the ladies and waiting for a response. How did the girl see the android-like cool guy before her? And again, what was this android-like coolness anyway?
変態
Not a positive reaction, of course not. Moshi's prank effectively gave her the worst possible impression of me. Haru had kicked my composed ass over and over. The two boys stopped her, and then she, breathing heavily, fled the dining hall. The guys followed soon after, leaving me and Corey. Am I in the wrong here?
後で全員叱っておくわね。
She was all red ever since then. It was awkward as hell. I distracted myself by getting back to fixing plates. Eventually, we're joined by the old wolf guy. I wasn't quite done with my job yet, but like last time, I was given a break, so I went outside.
嵐を見と毛が生えり
Oh,
夫妻子さん、お疲れ様です。
getting close to Red Cat Go was important for both survival and finding out the truth. I still had some affection for her, as well as memories of our last time together. However, last time when I felt a similar way about Chimi, I was hit with a big surprise. It wasn't just Chimi, though. The Feast of the Yomi Purge seemed to bring about a total change in the nature of people. Also, I don't remember that happening. Where was that last picture? I don't remember it. Irekago became a wolf this time. I wasn't sure if she would instantly kill her like she claimed she would. In fact, as a wolf, she would know Meiko's guardian or lack thereof, leaving the humans at a huge disadvantage. And most of all, if I got too close to her, it would make parting with her a whole lot harder. Even if I lost some of them, I had memories of the previous loop, so this was actually a big deal for me. The emotional strain would gradually pile up, and eventually even a guy as warped as me would snap. Thus, I would only get close to people as friends. That was probably the best way to go about this. I had no idea who would even be alive once this all was over. It's even possible that there would be no one left.
我
It's
ら
an
を
old
生かすこの山神内山の化身神内明神様のおし神内さんのお守りはいかがちふましらみからすよくも
She was teaching me the song. I actually knew it by heart at this point, and memories it was tied to makes it even hard to listen to.
あやしよみびとなきにせん
I looked away and saw Chimi snickering as she waited for the right time to pop out.
うくれやひとひにひとり
切り立った。
Oh, hello.
あれ？
She knew exactly what she was doing with this sudden appearance and how mischievous. Were you hunting or something?
ああ、惜しい。肝臓じいちゃんの獲物の解体の手伝いをちょっとですね。
I see, that suits you.
何ですかそれ？なんか傷つく。
Crap. I suddenly remembered what she was like when she gave a sarcastic comment. If she'd been telling the truth back then, she wanted to kill me ever since she first met me. I meant even now she was... Hold on. Did that mean that all the stuff I jokingly said about her being a murderer was on the mark? After all, the 2 shotguns were hidden in the room even then. Hold on. The first time we met, our very first encounter was among the rocks near Sauranaka. I picked up her flashlight and she called out to me. What was she even doing there? It was just late at night, yet she'd taken a flashlight and gone down a dangerous cliff to reach a locally taboo area. She also said this.
ちえみさんはね、ただ単に最初から殺したくて殺したくて殺したくて殺したくて殺したくて殺したくてたまんなかっただけ。そう、言ったら里帰りしたのだって殺しがしたくて戻ってきたようなもんだったしさ。
Those might have been nothing but words to make herself seem like the big bad wolf she was. However, it wasn't unlikely that she'd come down to Sauranaga because she was doing something worrying. She'd probably been there on the timeline too. We just hadn't met there. Maybe this time she'd actually finished whatever she was doing there. Well, no one had gone missing or anything, so it probably wasn't murder at least. It still made me curious. I was definitely attracted to her cheer, tact, and mystery, but this time would focus on exposing the secrets. He who hunts 2 hares catches neither. I would only consider her as a potential hazard. Hey, I'm just saying that your wild image suits hunting. You honestly seem like a feline animal, Jimmy.
お、いいですね、ちえみちゃん呼び。ついでに肉食獣に味見されてみます？
なんとハレンチな私もリカ子とお呼びください。
なんだそれ。
You can call me by my first name too. What a mess of an exchange, though it still served to decide what we call each other. That was
何
fine
イチャ
by
イチャ
me.
してんのよパンツマン。
Suddenly we were joined by Haru holding a stick.
死んで
Ah! I was actually getting chased by a girl because of loot stuff. What was this, a 20th century
Pantsuma?
manga?
パンツマン
I I was worried that nickname would spread, and I really hope it didn't. I couldn't have predicted that I'd run out of time just calming Haru-chan down and preventing the nickname from rooting in their minds.
夕霧が嘘。
Was she afraid of the mist because of what happened 8 years ago? Haru-chan, calm down. Chimi, where should we go? In the spur of the moment, I went and called her by the first name, which I was pretty sure she didn't like, but no one
私が
would
寮に
care.
連れてく。春明さんは
Alright, I ended up staying in the prefab.
どうして？
I'll be staying there every day starting tomorrow, so I thought I had to let the visitor have a better place
春
this
明
time.
様。素晴らしい。お気遣いかと。
何ごちゃごちゃやってるの？急いで。リカ子さんはメイコちゃんのこと頼む。
わかりました。メイコ、みそぎ、物意味。
わかった。
春明さん、抜け道教えるから上まで一緒に行こう。春ちゃん、歩ける？
霧、いや、息が追ってくるの。
I looked at Chimi, she nodded, and I picked up Haru-chan.
さん。
いや、
She was pale, her expression was empty, her body was shaking, locked in a fetal position. It's when she'd seen the mist. What had she gone through? I suddenly tightened my grip on her. She meekly grabbed onto my jacket. I had no idea if I could get along with her, but it wasn't impossible. On the move, I noticed Hashimoto-san head to the hut I provided him, so it all seemed good on that front. After leaving Haru-chan in her dorm, I said goodbye to her, Chimi, and the two guys there who were waiting for Haru-chan in worry before making my way to the
寮の
construction
裏手
site.
の小道通ればすぐ行けるから。足は滑らさないよう気をつけてね。
She also told me about how to prepare the feast and was generally pretty nice about it. It was pretty annoying that I couldn't just tell her that I knew all it. By the time I arrived at the prefab, the sun was down. I began by checking how I'd fare here. I had taken only the bare minimum of food, water I had here. I came prepared, but I didn't want to have to use the bathroom until morning. This was the shabbiest sleeping spot yet, but since I was still pretty awake, that allowed me to think a bit more. It was about time to access the situation. First of all, there were two things I had to keep in mind. How Hashimoto-san joining would affect the feast, whether I could find out much about the feast, Fujiyoshi from Haru, and the former would probably be more obvious by tomorrow. If he died despite of all I've done this time, I'd be all out of ways to help him survive. I'd have to start considering if there was something inhuman at work, was actively trying to prevent him from joining. If he did join the feast, though, the Guardians assigned would definitely change, just like they had when Mimiya and I joined. That would be neither good nor bad. However, the info I gained the first time when I couldn't participate at all, the second time when I did, completely different. Naturally, there was a change in human relationships who benefited from them. Now this change, I would get to know people I hadn't interacted with much yet. Especially Haru-chan. I can only hope that Bing didn't result in her avoiding me. That reminded me, Mochi was the reason for my new title. Was he the biggest obstacle in my path towards the truth? Nah, he wouldn't admit it, but the guy liked Haru-chan and was pretty jealous that I was getting between them. Oh, so he was the one who killed... Was the sad face I saw on him the day just an act? No idea, but I could totally imagine him. Only to regret it right after. Oh yeah, Yasunaga-kun also revealed his feelings for Chimi right before... Didn't he? She instantly shot him down though. It seemed like she felt the same way the first loop, so that was probably the true. Maybe I just wanted to think that way. Then again, maybe being liked by Chimi meant that she wanted it, so I wasn't sure if I was happy about that. That aside, as a wolf, as a human, she was a skilled as debate and consideration. His words were rarely far from the mark, and had influence over his mother's and friends' votes. He wasn't self-righteous or some kind of loner, and with a good backer spurring him on, he could be an excellent human player. If he was a wolf, though, I instantly know it was from his lack of enthusiasm towards the feast. Maybe that would be considered cheating, but whatever. Meanwhile, though Chimi had some bold things during the last feast, she wasn't a very active in the meetings themselves. That was probably because she was like Mochi. She played cautiously as a wolf and avoided drawing attention to herself. Taking that into account, Chimi's whole hang me act on the first day was pretty impressive. It was a bold for a wolf to make such a self-sacrificing play at the stage, but it was at a point where people weren't ready to hang anyone, or human or wolf. She managed to make herself look like a human without any real risk. Kept the act going until the end. I heard that Chimi had a decently big impact on the feast I didn't participate in. If she became a human, she would surely become an invaluable asset to the humans. Personally, I didn't want to be enemies with her again, but I had no idea what she thought of me right now. Before the feast had even begun, she herself had told me that she'd always wanted, which meant that the kindness she displayed to me far could have been an act. That wasn't a pleasant thought. Reikeko seemed to be pretty fond of me. That was probably because of her. It was her idea that a special person who could do something about the feast. I wanted to do something about it, but saw no possible way at this point. I couldn't help but worry that I'd disappoint her again. She was pretty passive in the feast, and her votes often prioritized the local folklore and fairness. She did some dangerous things, though, like trusting me without any real reason to. However, as a descendant of the Usumatsu family, she knew full well just how scary the feast was and how to deal with it. The fact that she knew Meiko's position was pretty important too, and would surely be important now. I ain't sure about Meiko though. If she got a guardian and Reiko handled her well, it'd be all good, but if she wasn't the case, I couldn't expect much from her in the feast, and her votes were based on she felt at the moment she would be in nothing more. Reiko let her vote as she pleased, probably to hide that they were communicating this, which wasn't good. The old man who cried wolf was even worse. What was that guy? A senile old man? It didn't really seem like it. Konzo had said that he had survived the previous feast. He never said anything important during the feast, but had a vote worth the same as everyone else. He also pretended to be the spider last time. Though Rikako came out as a spider, as Meiko represented, she was essentially the real thing, claiming to be the spider despite the only meaningful if you were the badger. After all, if the badger presents themselves to the wolves, once enough humans were out of the game, they would have a ally, which would be pretty good for them. And if he was capable of thinking that much, it meant that he was just senile, quite the opposite in fact. But that idea didn't click with the fact that he had always ended up getting hanged. What was he even after? I had more than enough evidence to conclude he was insane, but that just made spending time thinking about him more of a pain. Now, while Konzo-san's actions and goals were obvious, it was hard to control. He had been handling the feast based on experience from the other one, and I was a relatively logical approach, but it wasn't flexible at all. He was extremely overbearing when it came to the flow of the conversation, and didn't make unnecessary sacrifices, which led to a lack of stability. He was also had a weak point in Haru-chan. When it concerned her, he became dangerous and violent. The elder Tae was simply a hyper-traditionalist who resent the younger folk, and certain situations it was easy to get her vote right, but in others she was nothing but a hindrance. She was also Takumi-san's a key person's weak point. Handling that whole matter was difficult. Tei-san's opposite was Yoshitsugu Orobi. He didn't care much about tradition and hated the elders as well as the village. He was also the intense type and could easily mess up the feast. It's possible for him to make peace with his mother and brother, enter the Yasunaga-kun faction. But if left to his own devices, he could break the rules and get eliminated from the game. First night handling him was difficult. His mother, Kori-san, was generally a passive player, followed Yasunaga-kun, and had a tendency to do the unexpected things. When Yoshitsugu had died, she tried to poison everyone's food, and she also tried to bend the feast rules and leave a dying message. She was the sole source of decent food here, and honestly I wanted her and her son to survive until the end. And then there was the man who understood and loved her. Takumi-san, he was important as the facilitator and meditator, keeping Yasumizu fight despite the shins of the feast. He had a lot of weaknesses though, such as his antagonism towards outsiders, the village heads, as well as his tendencies to do unnecessary stuff on his own. However, all of it was outweighed by his popularity, charisma, and sheer strength, which were useful every now and then. Overall, he was someone I wanted to depend on. He really had to form a trusting relationship with his brain though. Now Kiyonosuke no Satoshi was pretty hard to evaluate. He often said things that didn't have to be said, couldn't read the mood, and tended to create conflicts between himself and Yasumizu's people, but despite expectation, ended up surviving. He actually wasn't wrong most of the time, but his presentation alone often ruined it completely. He was the one of the few village heads in the group, so I could at least count on him to prevent any unfair votes towards Reikeko, but aside that, I just remember that he was a doctor. Couldn't he examine the dead bodies? Why did I have to do it when he had him around? He hadn't insisted on examining a single corpse so far. Was it because he was afraid of dead bodies or something? That's the kind of joke that wasn't funny in a situation like this. Besides them, there were journals. The Mimiya-san had pretty much manipulated by Kichimi. It's hard to read. She could keep her cool and she could probably make some decent contributions to the feast, but I felt that her knowledge of the folklore and the occult stuff would be necessary for my current main goal. As for Hishimoto-san, he hadn't survived this night even once this far. However, though, the first impressions I had made him seem like nothing but some fat guy, he did show an impressive capacity for logic and reason. If both Mimiya-san and Hishimoto-san survived, I imagine they would perform really well in the feast. Of course, it was hard for them to pass the barrier all outsiders faced here. And then there was myself. I was the most suspicious here, and I the one most likely to get hanged. Last time I had been able to survive because I was the snake. It helped me get Takumi-san and Reikeko-san over to my side. However, there was no guarantee that it would happen again. It was best to assume it wouldn't. In that situation, I have focused on helping my side emerge victorious with myself still alive, rather than just helping my victorious. Even if I could loop, there was no guarantee that I couldn't get into a situation where I would be hanged no matter what. That was a heavy thought to have, but I'd have to believe I could make it and keep pushing forward, onward. I had to keep going. Suddenly, I felt drowsiness come over me. Had I been so busy during the day that I ended up more tired than I thought? It's time to cleanse myself. I took off my clothes, wiped my body, and that was that. I locked my shabby-looking lock and turned to my bed, if you can call it that. What would I do if my door was suddenly knocked down and some scary werewolf monster came in? I tried to keep myself on my toes, but my brain knew that wasn't how these worked, so I just relaxed and led me to sleep. I'd be safe today. I wouldn't die today. I'd think about what would come next, later. I felt a strange pain all over my body. Next, I felt that something was way too red. I could see the light of the outside through my eyes. I thought that meant it was dawn, but that wasn't the case. The morning sun had a bitter orange color, but this was red. Here was darker, colder. Felt like my eyes weren't even closed. Why was I unconscious with my eyes open? Not only did my body hurt, but it was cold as well. Too cold. I was sleeping on the ground. My hair was on some gravel. It was cold. My senses awakened. No, it was more like something had been cut off and had suddenly returned. It wasn't quite the same as the typical morning, and the bizarre sensation took me to adjust to. I was outside. The moment I realized that, all my blood left my face. I tried to jump up, and then I realized my body was sluggish, that my body temperature was extremely low. Had I been out in this cold mist for that long? My mind was in better condition than my body, at least. Why was I outside anyways? Had I broken some taboo I didn't know about? Did the prefab count as outside? Would I be taken outside and killed because of it? Maybe there wasn't even a need for a reason for that. It could have been that was used as an example. If Yudai Hishimoto-san did the feast prep this time, no one would die tonight. But perhaps that was a bad thing for its great Lord Shinai. The existence of the penalty that corruption was made best through example. A simple mess of a corpse was enough to prevent people from trying to escape or walking out at night. However, if no one broke that rule, no example would make. It was actually entirely possible to make an example without anyone breaking any laws. If there was a corpse tomorrow, everyone would just assume that the victim had broke the law. One would question the partner's decision. Well, we hadn't had any unexplainable victims of corruption thus far. That was my assumption in a way. Reikako going nuts made absolutely no sense, but it wasn't even clear if that was the corruption, so I would just leave it at that. Besides that, all instances of the corruption so far seemed to have completely plausibly caused behind them, so I had assumed that that was the Punisher was fair. But could I trust their believance now in this situation? I was an outsider who barely known here, and that kind of made me the best person to make an example out of. Had I been too optimistic to assume I wouldn't die today? My throat was dry, which made me even colder. My irritation and panic broke into tolerable limits, and I finally regained my senses, control of my body. Therefore, the red light all around me. Its source was distant, but it lit up the entire mist, giving it a bewitching, unsettled shine. It made me both uneasy and scared. It reminded me of the first mist I'd ever seen, even though it was late at night. However, unlike the first time, I didn't feel any beasts nearby. I strained my eyes to look into the mist, and realized that I had someone at my side. Or rather, I realized that there was a humanoid silhouette within the red light. It was a girl. Haru. Haru-chan? As I tried to stand up, I staggered pathetically and collapsed again. I could barely even speak. She noticed me, slowly turned her face towards me, and looked down at me with the eyes showing no hint of emotion, thought, or life. She even smiled a bit.
Kusaishi-san.
I heard my name. It surprised me, but I somehow turned to the other side and saw Koi Orobi. Her eyes and expressions were almost exactly like Haru.
神様がおいでになりますよ。
Was I still half asleep? Was this some sort of dream? Why were they here anyway? But if I could actually see the god that Chimi, Reikako, and Haru-chan talked about, I would accept in a heartbeat. I turned to the direction that those two were facing. In the red misty darkness, I saw the outline of the big, large tree. It was the hanging tree. That meant that this was the graveyard. And there were 3 lights, or rather sets of them, within the mist. It took me a moment, but I realized they were eyes. The vague silhouettes seemed human and yet not human at the same time. Was that God? Why had they appeared before us? Questions filled my head. My thoughts became dull, and my sense of logic froze. My visions contracted. Suddenly,
これより誠の伝えを教えん。
It was like a rumble, but it was definitely a voice. We will now tell you the true legend. Being told by the three wolves. They're not the three pigs. They're the three wolves, and they're not bringing anybody house down. In fact, they're gonna build houses apparently. Maybe, I have no idea.
狼未だ滅びず
The wolves aren't dead yet.
滅びしは主情なり
It's the humans that are dead.
人かがちましらカラス雲
Humans, snake, monkeys, crow, spider.
読みより落ちけり
All of them have risen up from
さ
Yomi.
らば山が掟によりて
The law of the mountain says,
皆人なきにせん
You were chosen to be the wolves.
読み人たやして山河を済ますべし
Destroy the Yomi Pito, purify the mountain and
我
river.
ら老面を授くれば
We will give something to you.
必ずこぶりてみそぐべし
You must wear it and cleanse yourself.
さらば汚れの霧汝らが身を犯すことなし
Do that, and the corruption mist shall not harm you.
さても汚れの霧のこきことすさまじければ
But since the mist is so dense,
我ら無地なを使わさん
we will also send you the badger.
明晩無地な読み人の一人にいい模様をして汝らに組みせさすべし
Tomorrow night we shall inspire one of the Yomi Beta to become your ally.
これすなわち無地なの加護なり汝らにあたう我らがことよせなり
This badger would be our guardian, and it is our help to you. So the wolves always got a detailed explanation. They were low in numbers. Humans received the other guardians, and they were under pressure to lie at all times, were surely and conflicted about many things. The wolves actually had quite a disadvantage here. However, they had more information. They knew their allies and enemies about the existence of the traitors unknown to the
さりければ
humans.
人よに一人の血を流すべし
Anyways, draw the blood of one human at night. Anyways, seriously? Did he have any idea how hard
さ
this
ら
was?
ずはなきにせらるは汝らなり
Otherwise, you will be the ones to die.
夢夢疑うことなかれ
Do not doubt this.
夢夢疑うことなかれ
He just repeated it for effect, surely. He really wanted us to believe him. So the three of us were wolves. I had no idea if this was true. I didn't even know if this was real or not. The red light became weaker. My conscience began to fade. I had no idea. Soon enough, it was all dark. And thus, next time we will continue after being a wolf, you know, seeing how this turns out, and it probably turned out not so good, not so great. Alright.